I talked to Bob Uecker, by the way.
Oh, did you? Did you see that?
Yeah.
Was he mad?
Whatever.
Was he really?
Was he?
What do you mean?
Last time I went on Letterman, I told a story about Bob Uecker.
Yeah.
And what did he say? Does he not remember it?
He said, no.
Was it a bad story?
The story is...
Don't tell the story.
Don't like it. I don't care. Bob Uecker's 90. I don't care. I love Bob Uecker.
No, he wouldn't know it from this show.
How do you know Bob Uecker?
Well, that's part of the story.
Part of the story.
Norm did a commercial for Light Beer.
Okay.
So it was when we were doing the Norm show. So he invited Norm out to spring training in Phoenix, Arizona, and said, "Look, man, come the fuck out to Arizona, man." And, you know, he's the guy you hear on the TV.
Yeah, Bob Uecker.
Right, but he's so filthy when he talks. Every other word is fuck. It's unbelievable.
Right.
And he's one of the funniest guys I've ever met.
Right.
So Norm says to me, "Hey, man, let's go hang out with Uecker," because he knows I'm a big fan, which was nice. So we go to Arizona. And it's the funniest 24-hour period I've ever spent. We played a round of golf with Bob Uecker, and he let us sit in the booth to listen to him announce a Brewer Cub game. Okay?
Right.
Now, he had a cough button. You know, if you're going to cough, you hit the cough button and you're not on the air.
Sure.
So, from what I remember, Norm may not remember this because he's friends with Bob Uecker. But anyway, Uecker would be announcing the baseball game.
Right.
And like a fucking jazz musician. It was unbelievable. If he saw a really hot chick in the crowd, he would hit the cough button and say something filthy about her, then go right back to announcing the game. It was like magic. So
unbelievable. You'd think that's a high-risk thing to be doing. That's like walking the high wire.
He would say shit like this. He'd go, here's the 2-2 pitch to Sosa, ground ball to shortstop. Look at the fucking tits on that whore. Over to first base, 2 down.
And he'd hit the button that quickly.
Yeah, and
so you must have been out of your mind, entertained. And now when you listen to him, you're wondering, like, during the spaces, what he's saying.
Howard, that's the story I told on Letterman. I cleaned it up.
Right.
And he started using like old guy words for the chicks. Like he'd go, fly ball to center field. God, I'd like to get with that trollop. That's the third out. So the other thing he did, let me tell you one other thing he did, because this is amazing.
Yeah.
He sees John Fogerty.
Oh, that was what I was going to say.
Creedence Clearwater
Let
Revival.
me tell that.
All right,
go ahead, Norm.
So he sees John Fogerty, from Creedence Clearwater Revival. So he's like, "Hey, man, that fucker's a rock singer." He goes, "But he can get out of the sand trap like nobody's fucking business. I played in a charity tournament with him." We're like, yeah, we know what John Fogerty is. And he goes, at the 7th inning stretch, I'll have the fucker come up and sing for you.
Fogerty's there with his kid, by the way. He's a big dope face. He's with his 8-year-old son, John Fogerty.
So we're like, no, you don't have to do that.
Right, don't get John Fogerty to sing.
Leave him alone. It's all right. We don't want him singing in front of us.
So then he gets mad at us. He goes, "Do you even know who fucking John Fogerty is?" So we go, yeah, he did Creedence Clearwater Revival. He goes, "Yeah, he did all that fucking shit." But anyway.
So what happened? Did Uecker actually call you after Artie was on Letterman?
I was in Arizona, so I said, "I'll go to spring training," forgetting that I saw Artie do it. It was really funny. Sometimes you do things on TV and you forget that it's a human being you're talking about.
I don't think it was.
Well, you know what it is? Uecker has a clean-cut image. He's one of these guys that broadcasts for a network.
Did I get him fired? I don't think I did.
No, but he probably doesn't want it out there that he's busy, talking about broads.
The other thing he did was he was on Mr. Belvedere.
Yeah.
And he found out that 4 years into the show, he found out that the actor who played Mr. Belvedere might be a homosexual.
Right.
I asked him a question because Fred Wolf told me there was a rumor that Mr. Belvedere, the actor, during a read-through, sat on his own balls at a read-through, and I didn't know if it was a myth or not.
Yeah.
So Uecker, he doesn't listen too much, Sean boy. So I said to him, "Is it true, Bob, that I heard this thing about Mr. Belvedere that he was at a read-through?" And then he goes, "Oh yeah, he was a huge fucking fag."
I said, "I remember you from Mr. Belvedere." He goes, "That guy was fucking riding up the Hershey Highway."
Nice fucking guy, though.
And then we golf with him, Howard. We're golfing with him, and again, it's the guy you see on TV.
Right.
And like, there's 2 women in front of us with 2 guys, and he's like, "What the fuck are these guys doing?" And he starts screaming. He goes, "Start moving! What is that? A gang fuck up there?"
So he's a fun guy.
He's the funniest guy I've ever met in my life.
How do you become friends with a guy like Uecker? You'd think
I know how
you guys
don't
would
become friends.
But I just think you two guys would have no reason to get together. Here you are, this irreverent comic.
We did a Miller Lite commercial.
That started the friendship.
But anyways, I was in Arizona a couple weeks ago, 3 weeks, a month ago, whatever, for spring training. I went up to the booth, and He goes, man, what about that fucking Artie Klein?
Artie Klein.
And then he goes, he really does not like Artie Klein anymore. And he goes,
he doesn't know Artie Klein.
Fuck Artie Klein.
Yeah, Artie Klein's an asshole.
Yeah.
Right.
He goes, the funniest thing is, he goes, that cocksucker must be running a little short of material.
Two pitch to Edgar Martinez down. The fastball swung on at the deep center field. Buddy Williams goes back and it is given up the right with it. The Buster this time, Grandma. It is a grand salami. And the Mariners lead it 10-6. I don't believe it.
From high atop the Robinson Gearing Studio Complex and straight out of God's country, Pawleys Island, South Carolina, the Let's Talk Baseball Podcast Network proudly presents Backwards K Pod. And now, here's the host of the show, Jake Robinson.
Good moment, baseball universe. What is up? What's cracking? Once again, back is the incredible, the pod animal, Jake the Snake Robinson from the Let's Talk Baseball Podcast Network. I'm coming out of Pawleys Island, South Kakalaki, half man, half podcast machine. Back in the Captain Kirk chair, shields down, photons up. Prepare to engage on this week's digital audio program that I call Backwards K Pod, where we collect ball players and their stories. What's up, seamheads? What's cracking? What's juicy? Want to welcome all of you back for another scintillating edition of Backwards K-Pod as the first season is winding down to these last 2 weeks of 2022. It's been an honor to be your captain this season as we have covered a ton of baseball history through the game's indelible stories, characters, and look, I'm chomping at the bit to get the brand new second season up and moving as I feel like I have some great topics in pocket to cover for you seamhead freaks out here. So all my loyal OG soldiers who have been there from day one through all my endeavors, the Let's Talk Baseball Podcast Network Facebook group page, and all the newbie pod surfers who ended up in this barrel and have stuck with me. I just want to extend my sincerest thanks to you and let you know that I will never forsake my Seamhead audience. I'm all in, all baseball, 24/7, 365 days, 52 weeks a year. I mean, look, for me, there's baseball at the top, and then breathing, and then sex, I guess. And these are a few of the Snake's favorite things. There is no off season. Honestly, I could care less about any other sport. I mean, I still watch them. But, really, who cares? It's baseball, baseball, baseball for me, and I cater to the good brothers and sisters who share this passion and love for the game with me. I'm coming through every Tuesday with that free baseball smoke.
You don't want that smoke.
And look, I'm, no Patreon, no crowdsourcing. I've told you that since day one. I don't charge you a penny for the content here. I love my audience. I truly do. And I would never charge my Seamhead Army for the content here at Backwards K-Pod. I know the company that I work for has implied on more than one occasion for me to go that route, but, that's just going to be a hard pass for me. The economy is fucked up, and I just love and respect my audience way too much. So, look, I ain't never going to charge you for the content, but if you would like to donate 5 stars and well-written reviews of my performance, I'll take that. You can do that on the Apple or Spotify platforms, especially, or any of these platforms that you might be on. Please remember to rate and review me as you see fit. I ain't scared. These reviews keep the show viable. It helps to, it helps the show in the search engines, puts a little food on the Snake's table. So, Backwards K-Pod is available on all podcast platforms, wherever you listen to your shows, or you can visit my website, diamondsnakejake.podbean.com, to hear any of the shows I've done and my always expanding vault of archives. Okay. I'm going to get right after it this week. Usually I take you through the weekly mail and other show minutia. And, we'll return to that format in a couple weeks. But I wanted to take a look at this World Cup soccer tournament over here in Qatar that just wrapped up. And I know this is a baseball show, but look, every 4 years this tournament goes on in some part of the world. And for like a month, the whole world, for the most part, outside of the U.S., is soccer crazy. And look, the problem is I'm not a big phony. I'm not one of these Americans who every 4 years I act like I know the fucking game, the players, or even the rules sometimes, honestly. All I know is if the American women ain't playing, then, the Americans have literally 0.0 chance of winning that thing. So instead of acting like I know anything about the world's most popular sport, I figured I would bring someone in who could educate us American mutts the finer intricacies of soccer, and maybe he can tell us here in this country what the hell just happened this past month, or what just happened. A lot of these players, and I'll be honest with you, I probably watched about 40 minutes of soccer in the whole World Cup tournament, which is more than I've ever watched before. So I guess I'm slowly getting better like the country. I guess. I don't know. It doesn't really look like we're getting much better on the field. I'm going to tell you that. So for the very first Backwards K-Pod World Cup wrap-up, I decided to bring my man, Abel Rosario Jr. He's just one of these dudes in the Let's Talk Baseball Podcast Network group page. He's family. He's a diehard soccer fan as well as a diehard Mets fan. And he's not one of these dudes who pretends every 4 years he has a clue. He absolutely loves this game. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to welcome from the Let's Talk Baseball Podcast Network Facebook group page, Mr. Abel Rosario. Hey, Abe, how you doing, brother?
Good. Thank you. You forgot that I'm also Dominican. I love soccer.
That's right. My brother is Dominican. In fact, one of the reasons I'm having you on here is because I really feel like I missed the boat when I did the Baseball Dominican show. And honestly, it's the one show in my archive. I'm not really impressed with the production value on that. And I'm thinking sometime next year I'd like to get together with you and do a round 2 of that Dominican Republic show, if you would be down for that.
No problem. Just want to tell you that I'm happy to be in your show, even if I have to talk about soccer in this baseball show. So.
Yeah, man, it's awesome. Look, man, I'm going to be honest with you. Usually, I'm usually a closed-minded American when it comes to soccer. This year, I really did try to open up a little bit. I don't know if you are aware of the Wrexham team in Wales that Ryan Reynolds and the dude from what's that show called? Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Have you heard about that? The team in Wales that they own, Ryan Reynolds, Deadpool guy?
Yeah, I heard about it. Yeah, they own their soccer team.
Yeah, and they're at the bottom of the barrel, brother. I mean, they're like, remember the Oakland A's and Moneyball when he's like, okay, there's 50 feet of shit, and then there's us. Like, that's how the Wrexham was, pretty much. And I've been watching their show, and it has given me an appreciation for the show. So I went into the World Cup this year, with more of an open mind than I've ever had about the World Cup. Now, it did come down to Argentina and France. From what I heard, it came down to a shootout or whatever. Why don't you give us a little recap of that championship game, in your eyes, what you saw?
Well, in that game, it's very tight because Mbappe and Messi, the 2 biggest world stars in the world.
Right. Hey, before you go on, I have to ask you this question. Do those 2 guard each other when they're on the pitch?
You could see them with each other most of them sometimes, but not really. It's
not like a head-to-head kind of matchup, quarterback on wide receiver deal, right?
This is not like basketball.
Gotcha. Okay.
2 stars can face each other.
Sure.
The defenders will guard them. But for me, Mbappe, he scored the first hat trick in the final in over half a century.
Wow.
He finished the game sitting on the grass, sadly. But he shouldn't be, so sad.
Yeah. I mean, he gave it his all, right? I mean, he left everything out on the pitch. How old is that kid?
He's only 23.
Do you think he's the best soccer player in the world right now?
Right now, he is.
Wow, a Frenchman, huh?
Frenchman.
Unbelievable.
I mean, he was sitting on the grass, and you could see the president of France trying to console him. And there was an invited guest at the game, and the Argentinian, you could see the Argentinian players going all around him, celebrating, and he's sitting there,
right?
Just trying to be consoled.
Right. It truly is like that image of the agony of defeat and the thrill of victory.
Exactly. The tournament was, it was a high fever pitch.
Mm-hmm.
It was held in the winter, November, for the first time since 1930.
Wow. Now that I did not know. Let me ask you, and I'm sure you've seen many more World Cups than I have. Would you rank this as a great tournament? Would you say this is one of the great tournaments?
Yeah, I think this is one of the best championship sports game I ever seen.
Really? Interesting. Okay.
Because it has a lot of dramas.
Mm-hmm.
It's a game in which the team, Argentina, had a 2-0 lead, and we had a comeback. We had hat-trick by Mbappe, and we also witnessed Messi's greatness.
Right.
Maybe the go-away party for him. He scored his own 3 goals, including the penalty kicks. But he came up with a dramatic last goal at the overtime.
Wow.
And then the penalty kick started. His penalty kick started the drama in which, they all scored the penalty kick until the French players had 2 misses, and then
right.
Yeah, and that's what happened.
Let me ask you something, and I know that's kind of a problem with the American fan bases. You run around for 90 minutes plus, and then you end it with a shootout. What's your feeling on games being decided by shootouts?
It's unfortunate for a hardworking team that did their best and outplayed the other team, and then they have to go into penalty kicks.
Right.
But I mean, as for me, we cannot go 5 hours and then. True.
Do you think? Do you think they could add? Do you think they could add substitutions to the deal if it goes into overtime? Maybe they could do something like that.
They could. I mean, if they can, the FIFA has, the governing board ruling. They can decide on that, but they have to have the world.
Yeah, and I would assume that it would be kind of hard to change a rule like that. I mean, this is a very old sport. It's had these fucking rules for centuries. So it's a truly old sport, and I'm sure it's a lot tougher to change a rule in soccer than just about any other sport. Let me ask, how old is Messi, by the way?
He's 35.
Okay, so he's still got a little time left, huh? Or,
Yeah.
Okay.
But maybe if he turns 39, I don't think he'll be able to make the team.
Okay, I got you.
This could be this last one.
Sure. And how long has it been since Argentina won a cup? It's been quite some time, hasn't it?
Since 1986.
Wow, it's been that long, huh? Wow.
Maradona was the last one.
Yeah, that's the last one. That's unbelievable. Wow, that is amazing. I was a teenager, and I actually remember that. All right, so I'm going to tell you one thing. Watching the highlights of Argentina and France is... I don't even know what the Americans are playing. That's like a whole nother 4 levels above what the United States is playing, as far as I'm concerned. And maybe I'm just a novice and I'm not reading it right. But what do you think about the future of the U.S. soccer team here?
Okay, so I'm reading a lot their future. The U.S. is the second youngest team in Qatar.
Okay.
At this moment, and through Saturday's matches. The coach, Greg, he fielded 4 of the tournament's 5 youngest starting lineups.
Okay.
The number of players who will be entering their prime over the next 4 years, leading to the North America, which is in 2026, far exceeds the number who will be aging out.
Okay.
So I think they were, they're in the same, the same level as other countries like Mexico, Chile, Colombia,
right?
Even Japan. I mean, those are examples of other teams with that level. But the improvements are there. You can see it, and the recruits are improved. But they could do as much as like baseball does. In Compton here in California, baseball academy for the young players here for baseball. They could do the same thing in the urban areas for the soccer.
Right.
Maybe they a lot more interest for soccer, and I'm for sure they're going to be a lot of young kids who looks at the World Cup and they want to be one of the great ones. So
Sure. I think you're onto something there. That is probably the best way. I kind of look at this as like, the rest of the world in basketball before the dream team. You know what I mean? Like, we got some talented athletes here. I mean, we should have some of the most talented athletes in the world, quite honestly, with the technology and the diet and the money that we have. We should be able to produce some pretty good soccer players. And I think you're on a right course there. Maybe we should think about opening these academies, especially like in neighborhoods that, have a lot of Latino kids in there whose parents grew up with the game. You know what I mean? I think this is a pretty good idea that you're onto here.
Yeah, it's a generational project that the U.S. can empower. Their soccer governing body here. The U.S. can progress in the global hinterland to become a program that's regularly ranked in the FIFA's top 20, and they can do it. I believe they can. It's just that it's a matter of interest among the schools, the college, the scouting teams, and opening up academies. The fever that they can have.
So I think what you're saying to us as Americans is we need to put an optimistic face on this. We got a lot of young guys that are going to be entering their prime years in the next World Cup, and maybe it's best for us, instead of just having this knee-jerk reaction, we fucking suck, why are we doing this? Maybe we should just have a more wait-and-see approach. Correct? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I believe so. If other countries like, remember when Japan opened up their baseballs?
Yes.
When it wasn't that big of a...
Right.
I know it wasn't big way back before, but then
it started snowballing. Yeah.
They became famous with baseball, and they can do the same thing for soccer in the U.S. Baseball is going around the world. They're opening up academies. And now U.S. turn to open up academies for soccer.
That's a good idea, man. It is a good idea, and I can't fault your logic there at all. So before we get out of here, I want to talk to you a little bit about your Mets this coming up season. I know you're quite happy with what's going on there. Why don't you give me a little dissertation of how happy you are to be a Mets fan this year?
I've been a Mets fan since the 80s. I haven't been this excited since the 80s, when the Mets were very, very good for years, a decade. And just to see the press conference today by Justin Verlander is amazing. His smile. Let me tell you something. The owner, Cohen, Verlander and Senga and even Nemo had expressed that Cohen had talked to them personally, and that's how they decided to become Mets.
Well, yeah, that and the huge amounts of cash he threw at him. But I get what you're saying. He does have a personal relationship with these guys. I was talking to a Cubs fan last night. You know him, J.C. Johnson on the page, and he was telling me how Tyone said he got a couple of offers, but the real difference was that the Cubs actually showed up at his house, sat down with him, and expressed how much they really wanted him. So I think what Cohen is doing right there is a pretty smart too. I got to tell you, as an Oriole fan, I'm pretty pissed off that we didn't at least give an honest try for Carlos Rondon, man. I am so disappointed in my team this year. I think that's a great contract that he was signed to. I think it's fair for the team. I think it's fair for Carlos. And I think the Orioles should have been in on that, man. I'm totally pissed off. But I know you're excited as a Mets fan coming up. You got my boy Buck Showalter over there. That guy takes so much shit at the end of the year. I'm a huge Buck Showalter defender. I don't care what anybody says. I love that dude. And I truly do, Abel, really wish your team the best this year.
And I wish the Orioles the same.
Thank you, brother. Thank you. And also, man, I loved you stopping by. I really, really appreciate it. I'd love for you to come back. You have carte blanche, man. Anytime you got something you want to say. Definitely during the WBC tournament. I think I'm going to have you come in here a couple of those sets, man. We're going to talk about some WBC.
Yeah, sure. Let me know. Dominican Republic.
All right. Man, they are monsters. Even the pitching looks pretty decent this year. That's always been kind of their little Achilles heel there. But that team, whoa, man, the Dominicans look really, really tough. So I can't wait.
Don't count out the USA, though.
Oh, yeah. The USA is always going to be right there. Japan's always going to be right there. Shohei Ohtani's going to be pitching for them. Is Sengu pitching for them?
I'm not sure. No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Okay. I'm just curious. That may change. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But, yeah, man, thank you so much. Good luck with your Mets this year. And I'll see you in March, and we're going to talk some WBC baseball, okay?
All right.
Thank you, my friend. I'll talk to you later on the page.
Okay, thank you.
All right, brother. Peace. And there you have it, folks. That's my boy, Abel Rosario Jr. I just wanted to, first of all, thank you for coming in here and, and educating the few of us ignorant Yanks on the sweet science of football here for a minute this week. Like I said, I think we'll probably hear some more from this man during the WBC tournament, and that will be starting on March 23rd, 2023. And now, folks, it's time to load this train up and call all aboard. As I see the catcher is ready to come down. And I'm ready to add the next former ball player, current Milwaukee Brewers radio play-by-play man to our collection. And I got to be honest with you, I was playing that clip at the beginning of the show, and, it took everything to, not laugh my ass off and blow up the audio for you on that, man. But that is one of the funniest goddamn stories I ever heard. That's Artie Lang, Norm Macdonald, and Howard Stern show. Awesome clip. The majority of the audience, myself included, we never saw this dude play. We've seen him in commercials, on TV, in the movies, and, of course, in the booth. But we've heard the many stories of his playing career from his own self-deprecating mouth, I should say. And, look, for me and my money, he is not only the funniest man pound for pound in baseball, but he's one of the most hilarious dudes on the planet ever. In a world where, it's becoming increasingly harder and harder to remain funny without offending someone. Bob Uecker has refined his act through the years, and his mixture of storytelling and jokes will be his incredible baseball legacy. And that is going to, by far, long outlive him. When Bob Uecker was demoted back to the farm in 1961, Milwaukee Brewers manager Charlie Dressen told him, baseball has no room for a clown. And clearly, that dude missed the boat on that one. We all know baseball's business, but Uecker spent more than half a century in this game reminding us every summer day that baseball, at its essence, it's a kid's game and it should be fun. The self-coined Mr. Baseball, Bob Uecker, is as well known by both the casual and diehard seamheads, as well as, people like my mom who could care less about baseball, but she knows who this guy is from TVs, movies, and Johnny Carson. Sports Illustrated writer William Taffy once said, Uecker is the man who made mediocrity famous. Beloved for his self-deprecating humor, Bob will be the first person in the room to make fun of his own unremarkable playing career and his stats. Bob opines often that anybody with ability can play in the big leagues. To be able to trick people year in and year out the way I did is a much greater feat. The truth is, woefully overmatched and inept on the offensive side of the ball, Bob Uecker was truly a solid defensive catcher, and he had a career fielding percentage of .981. He played for the Milwaukee/Atlanta Braves, the St. Louis Cardinals, filthy. During the 1964 Cards championship season, he served as Tim McCarver's backup, and Uecker loves to intimate that although he was the backup, he led the St. Louis Cardinals to that championship. Even though the truth is, Uecker didn't see the field once during the World Series. McCarver, who played every inning in that series that saw them upset the vaunted Yankees, has said on many occasions that it would be highly doubtful that they beat New York in that series without Uecker in the clubhouse. And keeping everyone laughing and loosey-goosey, that was his unique skill. And he's gone on to take his huge love for the game, his wit, his humor, storytelling abilities, to win the Ford C. Frick Award in 2003, which is baseball's Baseball Hall of Fame. They present that annually to broadcasters. He's not just this one-liner guy with quips. He is truly a Hall of Famer at his craft. The man, well, he's as smooth as almost butter in the booth, baby. To prove my point, I'm going to bring up a sample of some of his amazing calls for the Brewers throughout the years. Let me see what we got here. Here we go.
Here's the pitch. A curveball! Through the deep left. Gonna get way over here and gone for dear. And they have tied it at 4. Whoa. 3-2, 2 outs, 4-4, ninth inning. Gander, there he goes. The pitch. A swing and a fly ball. Right field and deep. Get up and get out of here. Gone for Swaim. And they've done it again. 12 in a row on a 2-run blast by Swaim to win it. Oh, my goodness. Holy cow. Do you believe it? Look at a drive. Left center deep. Nuno deals. This one is hit in the air to right center. Deep. Way back. Get up. Get out of here. Gone for Maldonado. He just hit a walk-off out of here. And this one is over. Martin Maldonado went out of here in deep right center against Vidal Nuno. And the Brewers in 17 innings in the 17th. How about Martin Maldonado? He caught them all here today. He was in harness for all of it. He has his third hit in the game. Correction, his fourth. A pair of doubles, a single, and now a walk-off home run to win this one for the Crew. The final. Wow. What a game this was. Final score. It's 7-6. Rodney has a new sign from Blanco. He's ready. And the numbers. Morgan, a smash up the middle. Base hit to center. Here comes Gomez. Around third. A throw and the Brewers win. The pitch. Lucroy to left and deep. Hey! Get up! Get up! Get out of here! Gone for Lucroy. He just hit a walk-off against Aroldis Chapman. How about that one, folks?
And, man, I'm honestly, I could listen to Bob Uecker call home runs all day. The get up, get out of here, gone. I mean, it's just so effortless, and it's full of passion and love of the game, and I just love him as a broadcaster. Bob Uecker was actually the first native of Milwaukee to be both signed by the Braves as well as traded. Uecker said one of the greatest highlights of that first season was a walk-off walk with the bases loaded in an inter-squad game in spring training. The second highlight of that year was being issued an intentional walk during that spring training from the great Sandy Koufax. And his third memory was getting caught in a rundown against the Mets. He was very proud of that intentional walk by Koufax, but he later found out that the commissioner had rebuked Koufax for the walk, and he told him if that ever happened again, he would be fined for damaging the image of baseball. Robert George Uecker, born January 26, 1934 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, although he often jokes to the contrary. He says he was actually born in Illinois, and here's the story. My mother and father were actually on a margarine run to Chicago because we couldn't get colored margarine in Wisconsin. Now, on the way home, my mother was with child, meaning pregnant with him. Her labor pain started, and my dad pulled off into an exit area. And that's where the birth took place. There were 3 truck drivers there. One guy was carrying butter. One guy had hot dogs. And the other guy was a retired baseball scout who kept telling my folks I probably had a chance to play somewhere in the bigs down the line. His parents, Gus and Susan Uecker, they were Swiss immigrants who relocated to Wisconsin in the 1920s. By profession, Gus was a tool and die maker, but he was a hell of an athlete as he was a gifted soccer player back in his native Switzerland. Uecker acknowledges he got most of his talent genetically from his father. And Uecker loved his parents, but his father was always his hero. He often tells of his father's incredible discipline and devotion to family as he was able to support his wife, son, and 2 daughters on the $3 to $4 a day, doing that, working on cars. Bob's father never let him down once in his life. He remembers how in the minors he was struggling to survive on his $250 a month salary, and when his cash was running low, Gus was always there to help prop his son up. One of the longest running jokes that Uecker has up his sleeve is, and I hope I don't butcher it here, the Braves signed me for $3,000, which was a lot of money, and my old man couldn't afford to pay that, but he did. Gus wound up having circulation problems in his legs. Over the years, the condition got worse and worse. By the end of 1962, he had to have his legs amputated. And a few years later, he would die, leaving a sad void in Ueck's life. And he began to fill that with laughter. Uecker attended a technical high school where he played both baseball and basketball at a very high level. You know, we always just hear Uecker with his own brand of self-deprecating humor and analysis on himself. But there was actually a time when Uecker was a damn fine ball player, and if not dominant on many days. And this is the beginning of that time. His parents encouraged his athletic endeavors, and you would often see the teenage Uecker riding his bike to Borchard Field, home of the minor league Milwaukee Brewers, to watch his baseball heroes like Alvin Dark, Johnny Logan, Heinz Becker, Danny Murtaugh. And he loved watching these guys pursue their major league dreams. And watching these cats, it motivated Bob as he became obsessed with the game and making it to the show. He made the high school team as a pitcher, after the coach was impressed by his huge arm. And again, don't get it twisted, there was a time when Bob Uecker was a beast of an athlete. At the age of 18, he becomes a catcher for good after a teammate handed him the gear and asked him if he could do it better. And he did. Uecker always with a different story of origin for his shit. He says he was pitching and the manager came out to take him out of the game. And Bob recalls, I didn't want to come out. I was embarrassed with my parents in the stand. So I say to the coach, let me do this one last guy. I struck him out the last time he was up. And the coach says to him, yeah, but this is still the same inning. I got to take you out. And that, he says, was the beginning of his catching career. Uecker never finished high school, which I find interesting. He's the first person I've done here at Backwards K Pod without a high school diploma. In 1954, at the age of 20, he enlisted in the Army. He hopes to avoid going overseas by playing military baseball with soldiers who are in the minors or in college. Now, folks, we've learned many ways to get to the bigs at this first season here at BKP, but never anything like this. So, look, at the time, Uecker had never played minor league ball or gone to college. He's a high school dropout. So what does the resourceful Bob Uecker do? Well, he lies. Upon enlistment, in hopes of joining the team, he claims to have played at Marquette. And he chose Marquette mainly because it was located in Milwaukee. They didn't even have a baseball team back then, but the Army never checked, and he made the team. He would serve his tenure by playing baseball at Fort Leonard Wood in Missouri and Fort Belvedere in Virginia. And it was there that he would meet his future Cards teammate and good friend, Dick Groat. Upon leaving the Army, he signed with his hometown Braves for $3,000 in 1956. He also got offers from the Phillies, Pirates, as well as the New York Yankees. He then bounced around the Braves farm for about 6 years, where his bat, it had some pop and power. 1956, his first year in the minors. He plays for 2 affiliates, the classy Eau Claire Northern League team, which we spoke about that team in the Hank Aaron pod a couple weeks ago. And he also played for for a team in Boise, Idaho. Between those 2 teams, Bob Uecker clobbered 19 home runs. And folks, I just love saying that sentence. He clobbered 19 home runs. Uecker has power. In 53 games for Boise, he torched the league with not only those 19 home runs, but a .312 average. With Eau Claire, Evansville, and Wichita clubs in 1957, Uecker drops 15 dongs. And Boise and Atlanta in 58, he hits 22 bombs. From 59 to 60, he bounces around the Braves farm on 4 different levels at Jacksonville, Wichita, Indianapolis, and AAA Louisville. In 1961, he is only one team, Louisville, AAA. He is now on the brink of getting to the majors, and he's highly motivated. He bats .309 with 14 home runs that year. Finally, on April 13, 1962, all the hard work has paid off as the Braves' new catcher is ready to go scorched earth on these poor Major League pitchers. They got no idea what's coming. His first victim, and what will surely be a long line of victims, was going to be Don Drysdale. He's called in as a pinch hitter to face Don Drysdale, but he rolls over a weak rounder for an out. Nah, no worries. The next guy is going to pay for sure. So after 6 days off, April 19th, Uecker makes his hometown debut. The fans have packed a park to watch this young, powerful catcher and prospect blow up. And he's facing San Francisco great Juan Marichal. Uecker gets the start going 0 for 3 with 2 strikeouts and a walk. So, the OBP got a little bump there, but, Uecker looks overwhelmed and, in a harbinger of things to come, I guess we could say. Finally, with the change of the month, going into May, that brought in Uecker's first hit as a major leaguer off of Phil's pitcher Art Mahaffey, while pinch hitting for Joe Torre in Connie Mack Stadium. And I like to believe it was probably at that very moment, that very day, that Filthy began to draw plans for the vet, now that Connie Mack / Shibe Park was ruined forever by witnessing Uecker's first hit. After backing up Torre and Del Crandall, Uecker finished the 1962 season on a high note. On September 29th, he caught Warren Spahn's 327th career victory, passing former Philadelphia A's hurler Gettysburg Eddie Plank for the most victories by a southpaw. In fact, the light-hitting Uecker was a major component in the 7-3 victory over the Buccos. Spahn would praise Uecker for calling a great game, but Bob also went 3 for 4 with 3 singles and 2 RBIs. The next day, Uecker got the start again, and he hit his first career home run off a Pirates pitcher, Diomedes Olivo. In total, Uecker played in 33 games that year and hit .250. He made the 1963 Braves opening day roster, but he only got into 9 games as a third-string catcher before being sent down in June to Denver, where he batted .283 in 52 games. And look, Brady's manager, Bobby Bragan, one of the central characters we spoke about last week at the Gaylord Perry Show, And real quick side note, I want to thank all of you who sent me messages about the Gaylord Perry Show. It seems to gone over very well. We got a lot of downloads and listens on that one. If you haven't heard it yet, you can go to any podcast platform to hear it, or you can go on over to diamondsnakejake.podbean.com to get a piece of Gaylord Perry or any of the other shows in my archives. Now, if you didn't hear that show, though, this Braves manager, this guy, Bobby Bragan, he had a huge impact on Gaylord's life, actually. Sometimes for the good, sometimes for the bad. And here, Bragan likes Uecker defensively, but catchers Joe Torre and Ed Bailey, they've kind of made him expendable. So on April 9th, 1964, they trade the hometown boy to St. Louis for 2 minor leaguers, Jimmy Coker and Gary Cobb. During his 2 years in St. Louis, the backup catcher was used sparingly as managers Johnny Keane and his successor Red Sindis stuck with him. He was in general, he was pulled when he wasn't hitting, which, let's be fair, that wasn't often. He wasn't hitting very often, and he usually was only penciled in if another catcher was injured or they needed a late-game defensive substitution for McCarver. In 106 at-bats, he hit 198 that year. And like I mentioned earlier, Bob didn't play at all in that year's Cardinals' most improbable championship win. The Cards won the pennant by finishing just 1 game ahead of both the Phillies and the Reds that year. In fact, Filthy, they had a 6.5 game lead with 12 games remaining, but they lost 10 straight. And Bob likes to say, I never saw the field during the World Series. I sat my way through it. I caught it from the bully. The Yankees fans are throwing garbage at us, so I threw it back at them. Bob did, however, add a touch of his humorous antics to the series. During the pregame ceremonies of Game 1 in St. Louis, Bob found a tuba that was neglectfully left around by a Cardinals marching band member. He picked it up, ran out to the outfield next to pitcher Roger Craig, and he began shagging fly balls with the open horn tuba. And the Yankees are literally Mickey Mantle, Whitey Ford, Billy Martin. They're dying. They're laughing their asses off in the dugout. And the story has an even crazier end. You know, he's actually out there shagging fly balls with a tuba. Well, at the end of the series, everyone got their full World Series bonus check on the Cardinals. Uecker was confused, however, seeing how his check was It was like $250. So Bob goes to the front office and he asks, what's the dealio with the check, dude? And Cards GM Bing Devine tells you they subtracted $250 for the dents he left on the tuba from catching those baseballs. And to this day, Uecker is still sore about that fine. And in 1965 exhibition game, McCarver broke his finger, and Uecker is the opening day catcher for the world champion Cards. He's catching Bob Gibson, and it was a 10-10 tie, and it was called because, Wrigley Field, they still are without lights at this point. And it's one of Gibson's worst outings of his stellar career. He gave up 5 runs on 6 hits and 3 1/3 innings pitched. One of those typical games that you might hear Uecker joke about all the time. And Bob himself had a typical Uecker game. In the 5th, he was caught by 2 horselings trying to steal home. In the 6th, he injures himself chasing a foul ball and slams into the wall. Steve Carlton, by the way, made his major league debut for the Cards that day, and he came out of the bullpen and he walked the only batter that he faced. Uecker hit .228 in 53 games that year, and after that season, he was traded to the Phils with old Army buddy Dick Grote, first baseman Bill White, and in return for catcher Pat Corrales, outfielder Alex Johnson, and pitcher Art Mahaffey, who he got his first MLB hit off back in his rookie year. That year, 1966, was probably the closest that Uecker would ever come to being a team's primary catcher. He had 237 plate appearances while platooning with Clay Dalrymple, who had 404 plate appearances. Uecker sums up his time in Filthy by saying manager Gene Mauch late in the game would be looking for pinch hit options on the bench, and he would yell, "Grab a bat, Bob, and stop this rally before it starts." And my managers, this is Uecker saying this. My managers didn't want me in the game. Hell, they didn't even want me on the bench. Kids in Philly would ask me often, which club do you play for? Which I would reply, nobody. But I've sat for a lot of teams. According to Uecker, he was fined by a police officer $50 for being intoxicated in public and another $400 for being on the Phillies. On June 6, 1967, the Phils traded Uecker to the now Atlanta Braves for utility man Gene Oliver. And the Braves traded him specifically to catch knuckleball maestro and future Hall of Famer Phil Niekro. He had previously caught knuckleballers Bob Tiefenauer in Milwaukee, as well as Bernie Schultz in St. Louis. So he had a basic idea how to survive behind the dish with a knuckleballer. Bob once explained, the best way for a catcher to handle a knuckleballer is after the pitcher throws the ball, wait for it to stop rolling, and then pick it up. 2 weeks after the trade, Uecker hit the only grand slam of his career off poor Ron Herbel of the San Francisco Giants. Ron Herbel probably wishes I would have got his name wrong right there. It was Ron Herbel. Spring training, 1968, March 21st. He and teammate Darrell Johnson, Clete Boyer, they're involved in a nightclub fight in West Palm Beach, Florida at the Cock and Bull restaurant. Bob was struck in the head with a beer bottle and received 48 stitches for his part in the brawl. On the field, he re-aggravated an injury he suffered in a motorcycle accident in the offseason, and he was released on April 2nd, never to play in the major leagues again. His last official major league game was September 29th, 1967. So, capitalizing on his storytelling and oratory strengths, he becomes like this PR ambassador for the Braves, and he began doing stand-up comedy with his material, mostly being about, this mediocre baseball player. In 1969, his broadcast career begins on WSB-TV, long before Ted Turner took on making the Braves a national entity. His first partners in the booth were a young Ernie Johnson, who today now does the NBA on TNT with Barkley and Shaq. And his other partner was Milo Hamilton, who gave us one of the most inspirational baseball calls ever when he politely told Babe Ruth to move over for the new home run king, Henry Aaron. His career as a TV personality was beginning to take off as well when he became a king comedian funnyman, Don Rickles' opening act at jazz musicians Al Hurt's Atlanta Comedy Club starting in 1970. And Uecker made close to 100 appearances on the Johnny Carson Tonight Show, doing an average of 3 to 5 shows a year. Johnny could be tough on young comedians. After a set, if Johnny invited you to sit on the couch, you knew you were gold. If you didn't make that couch, you might want to work harder on your material or maybe even contemplate quitting. Because back then, that was the mark of a great comedian, believe it or not. Who made it on Johnny's couch? And, well, look, Uecker, of course, he made it the couch after his very first set. And the two of them began to call Bob Uecker Mr. Baseball. Johnny Carson was as responsible for Uecker blowing up on the mainstream stage as anyone Uecker's ever had in his life. Johnny was a true fan, and Uecker was consistently leaving Johnny and his cohort, Ed McMahon, in tears with laughter. In the beginning of the act, it was heavily scripted between the two, but within a few appearances, they scrapped all the scripts, and Johnny had full trust in Uecker, and he let him do his thing, and he never failed to leave an impression on Johnny's audience. So, as he's now embarking on this entertainment career, he gets a call from Brewers owner Bud Selig. And Selig always adored Uecker's passion and his witty personality. In 1970, the Brewers were in their inaugural season after Selig had purchased the team that was originally the Seattle Pilots for one season before going bankrupt. And initially, Selig just wanted to give Bob a job, any job. He didn't know what job to give him. He wanted to give him a job because he loved him so much. So they signed him to become a scout. And Uecker now admits it really wasn't his thing. He says, he would listen to other scouts, just repeat what they said in his everyday scouting report. And he would also, on every single report, he would write, fringe major league player. And his reasoning? That's so no one would ever be able to blame him for missing out on a prospect that went on to play in the majors. GM Frank Lane, he storms into Selig's office one day and he says, I need to talk to you about Uecker. So Selig's like, yeah, my main man Uecker, how's he doing these days? So Lane throws a stack of scouting reports across Bud's desk and says, this is a goddamn joke. And the report was smeared in mashed potato and gravy, and it was totally unreadable. What happened was Uecker was writing the reports while eating dinner, and he had a mishap, and instead of rewriting all his bullshit analysis, which he couldn't remember anyway, he cleaned the papers the best he could with a napkin, and he mailed it on to the Milwaukee Brewers, where Lane was the first to look at it. So, with regret, Selig realizes that Uecker as a scout, it's not a good fit, so he decides to move him into the booth, where maybe he could display some of his personality and stories that Selig loves so much. So on September 4th, 1971, and folks, that's going on 52 years ago, the Brewers hired Bob Uecker to broadcast baseball games on radio and TV. And Uecker proudly exclaims today, all those years later, that he never once signed a broadcasting contract with the Brewers, and I never will. Whatever we agree on, we'll talk it out and then shake hands. In fact, I don't think I've even had a handshake in the last decade. So I find that very interesting. While achieving fame on the television, he's also beginning to grow stronger as a broadcaster. And back then, believe it or not, his weakness was the ability to find stuff to ad-lib. But, Uecker would hone his craft with passion and diligence, and he loved the challenge of painting the picture for a fan, who's like a few hundred miles away. That's what he always say about that fan that's a few hundred miles away. And for the most part, and I heard this a lot during my research, Uecker is pretty relaxed in the booth. He's not quick with the one-liners, trying to make you laugh every minute of the game. The real time, when he lets loose, is during blowouts. For example, a 9-1 game is, that's when Bob Uecker becomes Uecker, and he begins to rattle on with something off the cuff and crazy. And it's weird because it's like this dichotomy. Most fans like to listen to their play-by-play guy when the team is hot and they're winning. And, in Milwaukee, it's almost the complete opposite for Brewers fans and Bob Uecker. A 9-1 game is just what the doctor ordered to get you going in that booth. Bob Uecker would go on to co-host a variety of TV shows during the 70s and 80s, such as ABC's Superstars, Battle of the Network Stars, Bob Uecker's Wacky World of Sports, and, of course, the TV hit sitcom Mr. Belvedere. He would use his self-deprecating humor in hilarious Miller Lite TV spots where the beer emphasized, tastes great, less filling, and Uecker always being the butt of the joke of the commercial because of his mediocre stats and mediocre career.
The best things about being an ex-big leaguer is getting freebies to the game. Call the front office, bingo. And once these fans recognize me, I probably won't even have to pay for my light beer from Miller. I love them. These fans know I drink light because it's less filling and it tastes great. Good thing, sir. You're in the wrong seat, buddy. Come on. Oh, I must be in the front row. Come on. Light beer from Miller. Everything you always wanted in a beer and less. Good thing, buddy. He missed the tag. He missed the tag.
And folks, I love those spots from back then, man. They were hilarious. And I find it interesting that 40 years later, at any ballpark that you might visit, you may hear someone yell, I must be in the front row. Or, me personally, I used to love sitting in the upper deck of Memorial Stadium when I was a kid and yelling, he missed the tag! He missed the tag! And it's just so funny to hear it all these years later. These sports phrases have stood the test of time, and they have become a part of the baseball lexicon of language. I've seen kids obviously way too young to know the origins of these words, and I've heard them mutter these phrases. Obviously there's some good parenting going on there. As far as the show Mr. Belvedere, he had a hit there as the sitcom ran for 6 years, from 1985 to 1990. To do the shows and all these commercials, as well as calling games for the crew, the Brewers were always accommodating and willing to let Uecker explore his comedic ambitions, as long as it never had an impact on his baseball job, and it never has. In 1989, Bob Uecker was handed the role of a lifetime when he appears in a movie, the movie Major League, starring Tom Berenger, Wesley Snipes, Charlie Sheen. But for me, the real star is Bob playing Indians broadcaster Harry Doyle as he steals scene after scene. And as much as I love Major League, and I know a lot of you in the audience love it as well, I really don't think the movie is as great as it would have been without Uecker. I mean, honestly, he stole it.
So the Tribe drops its third straight on this trip, 6-1 to the Rangers. For the Indians, one run on, let's see, one hit. That's all. We got one goddamn hit.
You can't say goddamn on the air.
Don't worry, nobody's listening anyway.
And the release of that movie, it gave a whole new generation of baseball fans an introduction to the Milwaukee Funnymen. And just like I must be in the front row, and he missed the tag, Bob Uecker as Harry Doyle added even more flavor to our baseball lexicon. Just a bit outside. And many, many more in that movie. He would reprise his Harry Doyle character in the 2 sequels. The always irreverent and self-deprecating Uecker said he enjoyed making the first 2 movies, but Major League 3, Back to the Minors, it stunk. It was so bad that he began playing on airplanes the day after we finished it. Uecker is proud, though, when he goes to the ballpark clubhouses all the time today, and the ball players will be watching Major League, the movie franchise, and they'll start quoting lines to him. At one point, he seriously considered leaving broadcasting and just acting full-time, but, the allure of the game, no matter how good or bad the crew is doing, it's just too strong. He was once offered a broadcasting job by the Yankees owner George Steinbrenner in the early 80s, who... Steinbrenner on a road trip to Milwaukee's County Stadium, he saw a sign that said, Uecker's Pukers. And apparently it was a place in the stadium where they celebrated their hero Bob Uecker, and they drank $1 beers all night. Steinbrenner, the boss, he thought that was the funniest thing he ever saw. And you know him, man, he's always looking to prop his Yankees brand. So George pursued Uecker, which... it kind of pissed off Seeley, but Bob insists that the Brewers were never in any serious threat of losing him to the Yanks. He just wanted to kind of look around in someone else's store. The acting and comedy has been a thrill in Uecker's lifetime, but in the end, spring in Milwaukee, that's where it's at. That's his favorite place and thing in the world. In the 1990s, Uecker helped call the 1995 and 97 World Series with Bob Costas and Joe Morgan. In 2003, he receives the prestigious Ford C. Frick Award for broadcasting and a plaque in the National Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown. Of course, his speech is off the hook, and I didn't put it here because it would have went way too long. But I'm telling you, if you haven't heard or seen this speech, this Hall of Fame speech, do yourself a favor, get on your Google machine and search bar Bob Uecker Hall of Fame speech. And I'm telling you, it's amazing watching all these Type A Hall of Fame studs in tears from the laughter. I mean, Eddie Murray, who's about as steady as a person emotionally as I've ever seen in my life, he's doing everything not to fall on the ground laughing. Raleigh Fingers, Brooks Robinson, Al Kaline, Juan Marichal, Sandy Koufax. He got all the big boys in the palm of his hand with his speech. And Uecker would be the first to admit his skills were shite compared to these legends. But now they are in his world, on his stage, and he owned it. He had all those dudes in tears. Literally, you gotta check it out. And my favorite story during his induction was when his sons were younger playing Little League Baseball. Their team went to the championship game, and he was in attendance. He said one son committed 2 errors, and the other one struck out 3 times, including the last out. And after that last out, Uecker jumps to his feet and yells like, "Father like sons!" And he says it was one of the proudest moments of his life. He finally remembers walking the boys to the car, and their teammates' parents began throwing eggs at them. And he says that was one beautiful day in the Uecker family. In addition to the Ford Frick Award, he's been named Wisconsin Sportcaster of the Year 5 times. He's been named to Wisconsin Performing Arts Hall of Fame in 1993, Wisconsin Athletic Hall of Fame in 1998, as well as the National Radio Hall of Fame in 2001. And he can brag about something that he has, but Pete Rose, the Hit King, does not. In March of 2010, Bob Uecker was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame. Of course, Pete Rose has that same WWE induction, but he doesn't have that Baseball Hall of Fame induction now, does he? And if you would have told anyone, back in the 70s that Bob Uecker would be in the Hall of Fame and Pete Rose, people would have thought you were the most insane person ever. They just thought you were incredibly dumb. In 2006, in recognition of his 50th year in baseball, the Brewers placed the number 50 in their Ring of Honor in celebration of Uecker. 3 years later, Uecker's name was added to the Atlanta Braves Wall of Honor. His call lines for home runs, get up, get out of here, gone, are inscribed in the lights above Miller Park. However, in full acknowledgement of their hero, the greatest way to memorialize Uecker here, they offer fans the Bob Uecker seats at Miller Park. For a mere $1, you get to sit in one of the 106 obstructed view seats in the upper terrace level behind home plate. That is hilarious. And I think that's where I'm going to wrap it up, folks. I got to tell you, I am a huge Uecker fan. And he's getting up there in age, but he hasn't lost 1 ounce of his baseball passion. As a guy in baseball, storytelling business myself, I'm just a huge admirer of this man. I surely hope that some of that rubbed off on you as well this week. And seeing Bob Uecker in the Brewers booth, it just means baseball is back and all is right in the universe. So, let's take a look at Bob Uecker's career stats. Brace yourself for these amazing numbers. 6-year playing career with the Milwaukee and Atlanta Braves, the Phillies, and the Cards. A -1 wins above replacement. So, right off the bat, funny as fuck. I mean, that is so Ueckerish, right? A -1 WAR. 297 games, 843 plate appearances, 65 runs, 146 hits, 22 doubles. Never had a triple in his pro career. 14 home runs, 74 ribs, never stole a bag in his big league career, but he was thrown out 3 times trying to steal. Again, very Ueckerish, hilarious as fuck. 96 walks, 167 strikeouts, a 200, 293, 287 slash. A 287 slug, 581 OPS, and a 63 OPS plus. So, look, pretty amazing what this guy has been able to do in Major League Baseball with those kind of numbers. And it's funny. I had to take pause there for a second. I told you that Uecker had 14 career home runs. But 3 of those blasts, they came off some of the greatest pitchers who ever played. Fergie Jenkins, Gaylord Perry, and Sandy Koufax. And when Hank Aaron asked his teammate, Bob Uecker, how he even met that Koufax ball in front of the dish, Uecker shouted back, I just did what I always do, baby. I close my eyes and I swing as hard as I can. And I got a clip here of Costas asking Uecker what it was like to take those 3 legends downtown.
Your best for the best. I just wanted to do it. You know what I'm saying? I just wanted to do it. I don't know why I did it. I could have done it a lot of other times, but those 3 home runs against those guys, I mean, I apologize to Sandy Koufax to this day. I always thought that might keep him out of the Hall of Fame. So I always tell him I'm sorry I did it. But, I mean, normally when I came up against, I remember one night in Dodger Stadium, I came up with the bases loaded and 2 outs, and we're down by a run, and as I get to home plate, I look in the Dodger dugout, and they're all in their street clothes. So, evidently, they figured it was over. Yeah. But Sandy, I had a fastball off everybody, pretty much. Gaylord Perry. Every time I see Gaylord Perry, he tells everybody, or if we're sitting in a restaurant, he'll point me out in the restaurant and said, there is the worst day of my whole life. Not his baseball life, his whole life, because I hit the home run against him. Yeah. But it was really good.
And that's totally believable, because if you remember from the Gaylord Perry, that's a cantankerous dude, man. You know, like, he's bitching out his teammates for making errors, and I know he absolutely detested giving up a home run to Bob Uecker. That man was as competitive as it comes. So that's a funny-ass story. Not the worst day in his baseball career. The worst day in Gaylord Perry's life was the day he gave up a home run to Bob Uecker. And there you have it, folks. Another topic in the books. So glad to have Uecker in our collection now. There are plenty of videos out there on Uecker, many articles from both print and digital, plenty of stuff to learn. And I highly encourage you to go out there and research. I want to thank you guys for stopping in this week. It's been a blast. I hope you enjoyed hearing the story as much as I enjoyed telling it. I want to give a shout out to my boy Abel Rosario for coming through and educating my dumb ass on World Cup soccer. Thank you, brother. I can't wait to have you back next year. And you know what? You know, this is it, folks. We're down to the last show of the very first season of BKP with Bob Uecker in the rearview mirror. I now turn my attention to the last show, as we're going to close out the season examining the life of one Joltin' Joe DiMaggio. And wow, so much to cover there. I'm excited and nervous at the same time. I mean, look, you don't want to fuck that Joe DiMaggio money up, baby. He's an icon. So research, it literally begins today on the big fella. But look, that's another story for another pod here at Backwards K-Pod, where we collect ball players and their stories. Parents, if you see your kid sitting on the couch looking bored AF, by all means, take him or her outside and play a game of catch. Thank y'all for coming out. God bless, and win the day. And like my boy Shay Hillenbrand told me, one-on-one here at BKP a couple weeks ago, you go to hell, Andy Pettit. See you next week, Seamheads. Peace.
So the Tribe drops its third straight on this pitch, 6-1 to the Rangers. For the Indians, one run on, one hit. That's all. We got one goddamn hit.
You can't say goddamn on the air.
Don't worry, nobody's listening anyway.